Thank you, President Trump. One of the greatest peace deals in a generation has been struck. What does it mean for Israel? What does it mean for Gaza? And what does it mean for the West? Here's the point. In what began on October the 7th, 2023, as the worst day of bloodshed for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, when 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered and over 200 hostages were taken by Hamas, officially ended on October the 8th, 2025, some 738 days later. President Donald Trump's 20-point peace plan served as the key terms for negotiating the end of a 2-year war that was started by Hamas, perpetuated by Hamas, and ultimately ended when Hamas conceded to phase 1 of Trump's Gaza peace plan. So far, only phase 1 of this plan has been ratified, which includes the full release of Israeli hostages and human remains to the families, an immediate ceasefire by Hamas and IDF, Palestine receiving 2,000 prisoners and 170,000 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza, along with the return of 500,000 refugees to northern Gaza and a partial withdrawal of Israeli defense forces that will occupy 50% of Gaza until phase 2 is ratified. Phase 2 is currently under negotiation, but could include a plan for de-radicalization, a transitioning governing authority in Palestine called the Board of Peace, proposed by President Trump, which includes an apolitical Palestinian committee chaired by the president, and a full dismantling of Hamas's terrorist infrastructure that includes its vast tunnel network and weapons production. When President Trump arrived on Air Force One on the tarmac in Tel Aviv, he was greeted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli President Isaac Herzog, saying, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And in his first address to Israel's Knesset, President Trump said, "This is not only the end of a war. This is the end of an age of terror and death, and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East." All of this and more looks very promising. But how should Christians think about this? And here's the point. It is anyone's guess how permanent this peace deal will be. But there is no robbing Trump of the high praise and congratulations he deserves for his leadership in this crisis. And that praise has even come from the Palestinians, the Israelis, the Arabic nations, and even both sides of the political aisle in the United States. Yes, Republicans and Democrats. All of them saying that President Trump does deserve recognition, many saying he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Christians should think about this in a number of ways, first theologically, then morally and politically. We know that since Genesis, the division between the Arabic people and the Jewish people goes well beyond contemporary ethnic, cultural, and religious disagreements. This warring, which is fueled by radical Islam, no doubt predates Islam by several thousand years, going back to the very division of Abraham's two sons, Ishmael the firstborn, born to Hagar, and Isaac, who was the son of promise, born to Sarah, Abraham's wife. Make no mistake. No matter how lasting or permanent a peace plan might seem, let us hope it's a really long time. The descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have been warring since the dawn of time, and no peace agreement will be permanent no matter how strong that agreement might be, and no matter how powerful the nations are that impose that peace. Morally, we cannot be confused or succumb to the short-term memory loss often foisted on us by the media and even by social media. October the 7th was not an Israeli conspiracy. Let me say that one more time. October the 7th was not an Israeli conspiracy. It was a Hamas terrorist attack that claimed over 1,200 innocent lives, including women and children. There were over 200 hostages taken by Hamas, including women and children. The war was perpetuated further by Hamas when it refused to return those hostages home, and ultimately this ceasefire and cessation of hostility came when Hamas conceded to phase one of Trump's peace plan. Morally, Hamas is responsible for what happened. Morally, Israel was acting in self-defense, and much like the end of World War II, where over 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust at the hands of Nazi war criminals, nearly 2 million German civilians were casualties of war, not because the Allied forces intended them harm, but because Nazi war criminals put their own people in harm's way. Finally, Christians should see this in practical and political terms. This peace agreement marks the end of hostility between Palestine and Israel. And if seen through to its ultimate ambition, it could mean the end of Hamas as the ruling party and the reigning terrorist network in Gaza. This plan had the backing of over 20 world leaders, and not just in the Western nations, but many Arabic nations, including Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and even Turkey. That backing should represent to anyone practically considerable political power to ensure its support. In other words, it's magnanimous. And to that end, the Abraham Accords, which began in the first Trump administration, Israel's recognition as a permanent state in the Middle East by Arabic nations, demonstrates Israel is winning the long-term strategy. Christians need to continue to pray for the peace of Israel and should celebrate that the war, at least for now, has come to an end. And always, always remain watchful and hopeful until the Prince of Peace calls his children home.